Hi, my name is Rosie McDonnell-Horita. I am the Youth Transition Coordinator at Atlantis Community, and I was asked to be the motivational speaker for today's lunch hour. I'm not sure when this is actually going to be shown, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I was unexpectedly pulled into a health concern that I've been kind of dealing with. So I can't be there with you in person, but I'm going to do my best to kind of make up for it in this video. I want to talk about how we engage new leaders and new advocates in our disability community, but also in the work that we do, and specifically focusing on our young people and youth age. So the one thing that I know that we've talked about in most of the meetings that we've had from Sunday to today, we want to focus on what advocacy looks like, what systems change looks like, and how we can be a part of that and continue that throughout the work that we're doing for this coming year. I know that in the individual work that we do, whether professionally or personally, we want to make sure that we're including the most people, that we are intentional about building relationships, that we address issues such as housing and accessibility and think about those in a public policy aspect. But one thing that I heard feedback from is how do we engage young people in all of the work that we're doing? So I want to go back a little bit and talk specifically about how young people have been the spearhead of change throughout history, whether it's the Gang of 19 that we all know so well that happened right here in Denver, and breaking out of nursing homes and living independently in the community, demanding for accessible transportation, demanding for equal access and rights that we inherently have. Or the Chicano movement that also was really big here in the state of Colorado, and the student walkouts and all of that was youth-led as well. The civil rights movement and how youth-driven and student-driven that was, and the huge policies that were made as a result of that. There are also young people who are taking charge in this gun control conversation that our country is forced to have right now. There are young people who are riding around in tour buses having conversations about how important it is to be engaging in voting and calling your congresspeople and making sure that our voices are heard. So I don't want to underestimate how important youth have been in making history in the conversations that are surrounding advocacy and systems change. So we know that young people are always a part of the conversation. We just lump them in with all of the other great movements and leaders that we have. And so I don't want to necessarily spend this conversation putting our history on a pedestal. While I think that the Gang of 19 and the Americans with Disabilities Act are really monumental pieces of the disability histories community and the way our culture was built and the attitudes around that have changed. And I know that it's shaped us in where we are today. But I think also on the other side of that, while it shaped us, it also has changed a lot. Our environment has changed, our culture has changed. The way that the disability community is made up is looking very, very different from when Wade Blank was around, when Ed Roberts was creating student groups in Berkeley. And so I think it's important that we address the environment change and mirror that in the way that our advocacy changes and shifts as well. We've had a lot of charismatic leaders that have led our movements, and I think we know Ed Roberts, we know Judy Heumann, we know Justin Dart, we know Wade Blank, and we know organizations and groups like ADAPT that are not only known here in Colorado but also nationally. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about the work that they did, and I want to steer away from what that looks like in terms of putting one person as responsible for our movement or our change. And I know that there are a lot of people who might be identified as charismatic leaders who are in the room. And while I think that it's important that we have leaders who are spearheading our movement and taking charge and the point people for the media to talk to, I think it's also a pretty big burden to take on. And we want to spread that wealth of knowledge and that insight when specifically putting it and pouring it into our youth. So if we don't pass on the knowledge that we have through the organizations of systems advocacy, it's going to just stop. And so once those charismatic leaders stop doing the work or have been completely burnt out or have passed on, we need to make sure that there is someone who's going to continue and carry out our movement and make sure that it's evolving and changing and adapting to make sure that it's fitting most people as possible. But there's also questions of how do we do that? How do we engage youth? And how do we make them care? And I think that that might be a misconception. I think that there are lots of young people who I've had conversations with, who I've worked with, who absolutely care. They care about their future. They care about how they're going to move out of their parents' home, how they're going to start dating, what it looks like when they go to college. Are they ever going to get a job? And these are questions that I had as a young person when I was going through this transition after high school, figuring out how I applied for college, how I started driving independently, if I was ever going to be a parent and what that looks like. And a lot of that, those answers I got were from my peers and mentors and other people who I looked up to who've already gone through that. And they got to where they were because there were opportunities created for them. And there were youth positions on boards of Centers for Independent Living. There were youth advisory councils to give input on the policies and the changes that are happening that we inevitably will have a stake in because that's our future and it will affect our day-to-day lives. And the youth now do care and want to have a seat at the table, want to be on your board, want to tell you what's working, what's not working, and how to make it better. But it goes hand in hand. We need to have a seat at the table and an opportunity to have our voices heard, but also have it modeled so that we know what that advocacy can look like, what systems change can look like, how to self-advocate in a situation when you might not have anybody else to advocate for you or alongside you. And so giving us space to be able to take ownership of what we are inherently going to take on in the future for ourselves. And I want to just ask a question and see how many of you can either answer yes or talk about ways to make that change now. So how many of your organizations have youth representation on your board? Or how many of your organizations have youth input on the programs that you're creating or the policies that you're giving input on or writing? Or when you're lobbying and talking to your congresspeople, do you have youth next to you to share their lived experience and talk about how that will affect their day-to-day lives? I think these are immediate solutions that we can start having conversations around and bringing youth to the table to become more engaged, to make them have an opportunity so that they can show that they do care, that they are invested in their future. They just don't know how to do it, how to lead, what that looks like, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And I think in the disability community, at least I know from myself, the one thing that we all center our work around is nothing about us without us. And when we're thinking about our future and young people being involved and taking it over, we need to have a seat at the table. When we say nothing about us without us, that includes young people. That means small steps, having them attend their own IEP meetings and be able to have a say in what that looks like. And I think that young people are eager to get involved, and it's just a matter of creating the space to do that. And while it might seem like there's a lot of work up front in taking a youth on or creating an internship opportunity or sharing that wealth and knowledge as a charismatic leader of how you've gotten to where you are, how to write policies and make the change and be effective in your advocacy, it might seem like there are a lot of steps to take in bringing them on. But in the long run, it's going to make your world, our world, so much easier when we have more people at the table who are invested in making change and making sure that we are including everyone. I think that's what makes the difference. And I would love to have a conversation with all of you on specific ways that we can make this happen, brainstorm how to get more youth engaged in your center or your organization or in your day-to-day lives. But I also don't want to be your one and only resource for youth involvement and youth engagement. I am just one person, and I have my own lived experience and my own opinion. So I would be happy to work with you and connect with you and find a way to build that network and connection, not just in the disability world, but in other communities that you might be working with or that might affect your day-to-day life as well. So I won't keep you for long. Again, I really appreciate you being flexible and hearing what I have to say, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Have a great rest of your day.